The United States and New Zealand are among the most expensive places to live anywhere in the world. In this video, I'm going to compare the cost of groceries between the two countries. I live in New Zealand, but travelled to the United States a month ago, so I'll be comparing 150 similar grocery items to see which country is more expensive. On the USA side, I visited this Walmart supercenter in Orlando, and from New Zealand, I've mainly used the prices from Pak'n Save in Westgate. New Zealand and the US have very different grocery aisles. The brands are commonly different, the pack sizes are too, and the prices all have tax added on top in the US. So to level the playing field, I've mainly compared the weights by kilograms or in litres, not ounces, pounds or fluid ounces. I've also compared the prices in the New Zealand dollar. The assumed rate that I've used is 60 American cents to the New Zealand dollar. And finally, in Florida, there is a 6% sales tax. In New Zealand, the price displayed is the final price, inclusive of our 15% sales tax. My assumption before starting this analysis is that New Zealand's prices are roughly 20% more expensive, owing to the sales tax and higher cost of operating here. So without further ado, let's test that assumption out, starting with the price of meat. 1 kilo of standard beef mince is roughly a third more expensive in the United States, at about $20 a kilo. It's the same story for premium beef mince, which comes out roughly a quarter more expensive than New Zealand. When we work our way up to the ribeye steak, also known as a Scotch fillet here, the US is a whopping 55% more expensive. While raw beef is more expensive in the States, in New Zealand, beef jerky is a slight outlier, more expensive here by 1.3%. Next, we move along to pork. A kilo of pork chops in the US is a little over 18 New Zealand dollars, while in New Zealand it's about $17. Pork belly comes out more expensive in New Zealand by roughly 19%. This is repeated for a pork shoulder, also known as a picnic roast in the States, which is about 21% more expensive in New Zealand. A kilo of house brand streaky bacon cost $18.73 in America, and just under $18 in New Zealand, a difference of 4%. And ham is 24% more expensive in New Zealand. Both the States and New Zealand charge about the same price for drumsticks at $5 a kilo. Boneless and skinless chicken breast is 7% more expensive in the US, while chicken thighs are 55% more expensive in New Zealand. An interesting observation here is that chicken thighs are a cheaper cut in America, while in New Zealand they cost much more. When the price of a whole bird is broken down by weight, New Zealand charges 70% more than the States. And finally, we have rotisserie chicken, which costs 42% more in New Zealand. For a cheap white fish, the US charges 27% more. Over there, they sell tilapia, whereas here we have lemonfish. However, when it comes to salmon, New Zealand charges 34% more. In defense of the New Zealand salmon, the American stuff looks very pale compared to what we get here. And frozen shrimp are more expensive in the United States by 46%. If you were to buy these 16 meat items both in the US and in New Zealand, I would spend $10 more, or 3.1%, in the United States. Now let's take a look at the pantry items. Sweet Baby Ray's barbecue sauce comes out 160% more expensive in New Zealand, as it's imported all the way from the US. It's the same for Tapatio hot sauce, 36% more expensive in New Zealand. Shin Ramen, of course, is imported in both countries from Korea and is priced roughly the same at about $15 per kilo. Old El Paso sell a similar product in the US and in New Zealand. The tortilla and taco shells are 8% and 42% more expensive in New Zealand, while the tortilla bowls and taco seasoning are 28% and 37% more expensive stateside. Street kitchen curry kits are sold in both countries. In the US, for the same 225-gram packet, it's about 6% more pricey. Both chicken and beef broth are very expensive in New Zealand, priced 114% more than in the US. House brand peanut butter is 57% more expensive in the US, and house brand white bread is 130% more expensive over there. Bagels, on the other hand, are 124% more expensive in New Zealand. Simply, our consumption of bagels is a lot less. Kellogg's in both countries sell cornflakes and Special K. While the cornflakes are 146% more expensive in the US, the Special K has a much more premium pricing here of 30% more. Doritos corn chips were another surprising item, with the price in the US a whopping 73% higher than in New Zealand. Pringles, on the other hand, are much more expensive in New Zealand by about a quarter. Mission tortilla strips are priced slightly higher in New Zealand, up 8%. And Act 2 popcorn is more expensive here too, up 41%. Let's look at the canned goods. Sweet corn is 18% more expensive in New Zealand, at a little over $3 a kilo. Sweet peas are 136% more expensive in New Zealand. However, we mainly use frozen peas down here, so this product is much less common. A kilogram of Dole pineapple slices in chunks will set you back $6.14 in the US, higher than the $5.76 it'd cost you in New Zealand. And lastly, the Nestle evaporated milk is 16% more pricey in the US. Joining canned goods, we have baking goods. Brown sugar is a whopping 96% more expensive in the US, and icing sugar joins it up the same amount. White sugar comes in 53% more expensive in the States at $3 a kilo versus New Zealand's $2. House brand maple syrup is a surprising one, given America's proximity to Canada. It comes in 8% more expensive over there. Flour is also pricier in the States, with branded all-purpose flour costing 18% more and the house brand by 35%. And finally, for the baking goods, Betty Crocker's cake mixes are 19% more expensive in the US. Hershey's chocolate syrup is 56% more expensive in New Zealand, understandably because it's imported from the States. The opposite was found for Nesquik chocolate powder, which sells for 74% more in the US. Kids' roll-ups are a whopping 107% higher priced in New Zealand, and their Kraft mac and cheese too, by 37%. House branded pickles are 21% more expensive in the US. House brand pasta is cheaper in the United States by 18%, both for elbow and penne shapes. However, the Barilla spirals are 20% cheaper here. Heinz sells their ketchup for 16% more in the States, but their mustard is sent here with a 53% higher price. Kikkoman soy sauce, depending on the bottle, is anywhere between 22 and 49% more expensive in New Zealand. Hoi Fong Sriracha from California, of course, is 34% more expensive in New Zealand. Kewpie mayo is 30% pricier over in the States, and a 6-pack of mee goreng is 76% more expensive over there. Pataks charge Americans 44% more for their tikka masala simmer sauce, while the Passage to Asia stir-fry sauces are 46% more expensive. Ben's Original Rice to join it comes in 29% more pricey. And finally, I have olive oil and canola oil, both more expensive in the US by 42 and 29% respectively. Now let's check out some chocolate. Peanut M&Ms are 54% higher in the US, while Hershey's Kisses are 32% higher in New Zealand. Feastables chocolate, which can only be called chocolate at a stretch, is 8% more expensive in the United States. Tony's bars are 16% more here, and a Lindt assorted pack retails for just 3% more in New Zealand. We covered a lot of items here, 59 to be precise. If I bought all of these items in New Zealand, I would have spent roughly $40 or 4.4% more than if I bought them in Florida. Now let's take a look at refrigerated goods. Mozzarella comes out 3% more expensive in the US. A block of mild cheddar that would cost a little over $9 here would set you back over $14 in the States. Sharp cheddar, on the other hand, costs 10% more here, and cheese slices here cost roughly 25% more. Philadelphia cream cheese is surprisingly more expensive in the US, costing 41% more than in New Zealand. House brand butter costs more over there too, by 32%. While over there, I managed to find New Zealand's Westgate butter. A kilo of it will set you back $20 here, but Americans will have to pay almost $30. Looking over at milk, Americans sell a 1-gallon bottle, which equates to 3.78 litres. When I prorated the gallon down to 3 litres, I found the milk price in New Zealand to be 48% higher than what Americans are paying. Looking at the half gallon when upsized to 2 litres, New Zealanders are again paying more by 21%. When it comes to cream, the opposite is true. Americans pay 58% more for this. And finally, a dozen large eggs cost 30% more in New Zealand. Now we reach the freezer section. Home brand frozen fries are 137% more expensive in the US, and hash browns 58%. New Zealand, however, has more expensive imported ice cream, with Ben & Jerry's 70% more pricey, and Halo Top 45%. When it comes to regular chocolate ice cream though, the US is 31% more expensive. Sara Lee cheesecake is 43% more expensive in New Zealand. Now let's run through the frozen berries. Raspberries are about the same price. Strawberries are 46% more in New Zealand. Mango is 16% more. Blueberries are 24% more. And oddly, mixed berry packets are 50% more in the States. In the frozen veggie space, broccoli is about the same. Peas are 39% more in the States, and mixed sets are 55% more over there. Sour cream is roughly the same price in both countries. However, cottage cheese and ricotta cheese are 29 and 80% higher respectively. Yogurt is 20% higher too in New Zealand. 29 refrigerated products were looked at in this study. In the US, I would have spent $350 for it all. In New Zealand, I would have spent $346, a difference of just 1%. Buying a pack of Red Bulls is cheaper in New Zealand. Americans sell 355ml cans in their 4-packs, while in New Zealand, we only sell the 250s. Prorating the quantities down in the US, Americans are paying almost 60% more than Kiwis. This is true too for the single cans, up another 60%. Monster Energy cans are 41% higher too. Looking over at the fizzy drink, or soda for the American viewers, a 2-litre bottle of Sprite costs 42% more in the United States, as too for the Diet Cokes. Weirdly, if we instead look at the 1-litre bottles, New Zealand is 14% more expensive. Orange juice is 21% higher in the States. A 750ml bottle of Oyster Bay is fortunately cheaper in New Zealand by about 19%. Prime, brought to you from KSI and Logan Paul, is cheaply priced around the world to try and get rid of the stock, but it remains 232% more expensive in the US. Just 9 beverages were compared, but the result was shocking. In New Zealand, to buy each item you'd spend $45, while in the US it was a whopping $62, 36% more expensive. Now let's take a look at vegetables and fruit. Button mushrooms are 22% more pricey in the States, while Taylor Farm salad packs are roughly the same price. Baby spinach is 24% more expensive in the States, and iceberg lettuce too, by 11%. Carrots in the US cost 53% more than in New Zealand, while celery in New Zealand is 50% more. Spring onion costs 32% more here. The United States has more expensive cauliflower and ginger, up 69 and 79%. Courgettes, or zucchini as they are known in the US, cost 21% more in New Zealand. Wongbok, or Chinese cabbage, is roughly priced the same between the two countries. Broccoli is 40% more pricey in the States, while cabbage is 53% more expensive in New Zealand. Tomatoes are 29% more in the States. Capsicums, or peppers in the States, are a funny product as they're priced differently by colour. Green ones are 31% pricier in New Zealand, yellow ones 31% more in the States, orange ones are 5% more, and the red ones are 14% more. Onions though have the largest difference, being 274% more expensive in the US. Cucumbers are 56% more in New Zealand, while limes are 24% more. The opposite is true for another citrus fruit, lemons, which are 93% more expensive in the US. Oranges, however, are again 73% more in New Zealand. Apples come in 53% pricier in the States. Now let's take a look at fresh berries. New Zealand is 33% more expensive for strawberries, 178% for raspberries, and 133% more for blueberries. Grapes are imported from California, so of course these come in at 68% more. Fortunately, kiwi fruit prices in New Zealand are cheaper, with the gold ones coming in 224% more expensive stateside. Going back into regular fruits and veggies, red sweet potato, or kumara as it's known here, are 15% more expensive in New Zealand. Bananas too, by 14%, and potatoes are 53% more expensive in the States. In the fruit and veggie segment, we compared the price of 32 items. In New Zealand, I would have spent almost $300. In the States, I'd have only spent $240, a difference of 19%. To round out the video, I'll quickly look at some household items. 91 octane petrol in New Zealand is at least 34% more expensive than in Orlando. Scrub Daddy costs 26% more in the States. Scotch Brite sponges too, by 15%. Finish Power tablets are 49% pricier in New Zealand, but the Quantum ones are 13% more in the States. And the last item is New Zealand Manuka honey at a solid 230% markup in the States. If I bought all 150 items featured in this video in New Zealand, I would have spent a little over $2,000. In the United States, or rather Florida, with their 6% sales tax, I'd have spent roughly $70 less, a difference of 3.4%. If we consider the difference in sales tax of 9%, New Zealand supermarkets are technically selling products at lower prices than their American counterparts, which is very surprising. At the start of this video, I expected the difference to be 20%. So honestly, it shocked me we're just 3% behind after tax. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe down below and check out some of these other videos here. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to catching you on the next one. Cheers.